I didn't say a word during her 20-minute rant. I just unfolded the property survey and watched 47 homeowners realize they'd been using my road for free. Picture this. HOA President Patty standing at that podium, waving around a $70,000 for my unauthorized road improvements, telling 60 neighbors how I was destroying their property values. She had the PowerPoint, the fake engineering reports, even brought 3 lawyers to intimidate me into submission. This woman had spent 6 months making my life hell, measuring my grass with actual rulers, fining me for my daughter's car being improperly parked in my own driveway, threatening to have my house condemned because I dared to fix dangerous potholes with my own money. But what Patty didn't know was that every single expensive car in that parking lot had driven across my private property to get there. The road she was so concerned about? I'd inherited it from my uncle who developed the entire neighborhood. What would you do if your HOA fined you for maintaining your own property? Drop a comment with your craziest neighbor's story. I guarantee you've got one. Let me back up and introduce myself. I'm Jake Morrison, 52 years old, retired civil engineer who thought he'd found the perfect quiet neighborhood to rebuild his life. After a messy divorce that left me questioning everything, I bought a modest ranch house in Willowbrook Estates in 2019. The selling points? Good schools for my teenage daughter Emma's weekend visits, tree-lined streets, and what seemed like a reasonable HOA that actually maintained things. Willowbrook Estates sits like a little island of suburban dreams, 47 homes built in the 80s and 90s, connected to the outside world by a single winding road called Maple Grove Lane. When I first moved in, it was mostly original families, middle-class folks who'd raised their kids here and knew their neighbors' names. But over the past few years, gentrification had crept in like ivy on a fence. Tech workers and real estate investors started buying up houses, tearing down gardens to install security cameras, and turning friendly wave-from-the-driveway relationships into next-door app complaints. Enter Patricia Hendricks. Everyone called her Patty, but trust me, she was about as sweet as a parking ticket. 48 years old, real estate agent, drove a white BMW that she parked at precisely the same angle every day. Always dressed in yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, even indoors, like she was perpetually heading to or from some very important meeting about being important. Patty moved into the neighborhood in 2020 and immediately appointed herself as what she called the Neighborhood Standards Coordinator. I'm talking about a woman who literally measured grass height with an actual ruler. Her husband Richard was some kind of tax attorney, quiet guy who seemed to spend most of his time apologizing for his wife's behavior. They didn't have kids, which meant Patty had lots of time to focus on everyone else's business. The whole thing started in spring 2024. We'd had a brutal winter that left Maple Grove Lane looking like a moonscape. Potholes deep enough to lose a small dog in. Sections where the asphalt had just given up and crumbled into gravel. The metallic scrape of car bumpers hitting pavement became the neighborhood's unofficial soundtrack. Being an engineer, I could see this was only going to get worse. I sent a polite email to the HOA board offering to coordinate professional repairs. Patty's response came back within an hour. All modifications require board approval and proper permits. 6 weeks later, there was still no board meeting scheduled. The road kept getting worse. Mrs. Chen, the sweet 78-year-old who lived 3 houses down, nearly fell into a pothole while getting her mail. That's when I decided enough was enough. I called my contractor buddy Tom, guy who smelled permanently of diesel fuel and coffee, and we spent a weekend properly filling the worst spots. High-quality materials, proper preparation, the works. Cost me $3,200, 0 cents out of my own pocket, but at least people could drive safely again. The neighbors were immediately grateful. Several offered to reimburse me. I posted before and after photos in our neighborhood Facebook group, thinking maybe it would inspire the board to finally address the road properly. That was my first mistake. Within 48 hours, I had a formal cease and desist letter in my mailbox. The crisp sound of the certified mail hitting my porch at 8 a.m. should have been my warning. Patty accused me of unauthorized infrastructure modification and threatened legal action. She claimed my repairs didn't match HOA aesthetic standards and demanded I remove all materials and restore the original condition. Original condition? You mean the potholes that were literally dangerous? The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Older residents supported me. They remembered when neighbors helped neighbors, but the newer wealthy residents sided with Patty. Rules are rules, they said. I realized I'd accidentally triggered a class war in suburbia. That stale coffee smell at the emergency HOA meeting should have told me everything I needed to know about what was coming next. Patty called an emergency HOA board meeting for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, when working people are actually working. Only 3 of the 5 board members showed up, which was apparently enough for a quorum in Patty's world. I walked into that community center meeting room to find Patty set up like she was prosecuting a war crimes trial. She had a PowerPoint presentation, I kid you not, titled Neighborhood Infrastructure Violations, a Case Study. She'd printed out photos of my roadwork from every possible angle, complete with red arrows pointing to what she called unauthorized modification. This resident, she said, not even using my name, has created serious liability issues and threatens our property values with unsanctioned repairs. She claimed my work didn't meet community aesthetic standards, which was rich considering I'd used better materials than the original road. The board voted 3-0 to fine me $500.00 for unauthorized modifications, plus $200.00 per day until the repairs were professionally removed. Because apparently, filling dangerous potholes was a crime that required daily punishment. Here's the mini twist: I decided to fight back with facts. I showed up to the next scheduled board meeting with a full engineering report. Traffic count data, safety analysis, material specifications, the works. The room was packed with neighbors, mostly supportive ones who were tired of dodging craters on their daily commute. "I'm offering to donate this work to the HOA," I said calmly. "You just need to accept it retroactively. These repairs exceed county road standards." Patty's response? She pulled out her own engineering report, and this is where it gets good. From her brother-in-law. Turns out this guy's only certifications were in lawn care. His professional assessment was literally written on landscaping company letterhead. But Patty doubled down. She raised my fine to $1,000.00 plus $500.00 per day, and, here's the kicker, she instituted a new emergency protocol requiring all future repairs to use OOA-approved contractors. Want to guess who the only approved contractor was? Her husband Richard's golf buddy, who charged 3 times the normal rate. My daughter Emma, who's 17 and way smarter with technology than her old man, helped me create a detailed PowerPoint exposing the fake engineering report. We presented it at the next meeting, and you could hear the room's collective gasp when we showed the landscaper's credentials next to what Patty had claimed. 3 board members resigned that night out of sheer embarrassment. But Patty? She scrambled to recruit replacement board members from her wealthy neighbors, promising them property value protection. Within 2 weeks, she had a board packed with her allies, and they doubled down on everything. Not only did they keep the fines, they added fraud investigation fees to my bill. That's when I realized this wasn't really about road repair. This was about control. This was about a small person with a little bit of power trying to run someone out of the neighborhood because they dared to question her authority. Other neighbors started coming to me privately, sharing their own horror stories. Patty had cited people for having the wrong shade of beige paint. She'd measured fence heights with a tape measure. She'd fined an elderly veteran for having his American flag up past sundown. This woman was drunk on authority, and I'd accidentally become the symbol of resistance to her little suburban dictatorship. And here's something I learned that might help you if you're ever in a similar situation. HOAs can require you to post a bond equal to the disputed amount if you want to contest their fines. It's a legal trick designed to bankrupt people into compliance before they can even fight back. Always check your state's HOA dispute resolution process before engaging in prolonged fights. Knowing the financial requirements up front can save you from nasty surprises. By this point, I was facing $3,000.00 in fines and climbing by $500.00 every day. The smell of fresh tar from my road repairs had long faded, replaced by the bitter taste of injustice every time I drove over the smooth patches I'd created. But here's what Patty didn't know. I'm an engineer. We don't just fix problems, we solve them systematically. And I was about to start doing some very systematic research into exactly who had the authority to do what in our little neighborhood. Because something about this whole situation didn't add up. And when an engineer gets curious about property records and legal documents, well, let's just say things tend to get interesting. Patty's harassment campaign kicked into high gear. She started driving past my house multiple times a day in that white BMW, slowing down to take photos of my property like some kind of suburban private investigator. The soft whir of her car window going down became my personal soundtrack of dread. She cited me for grass slightly exceeding the 3.5-inch maximum. Yes, she actually got on her hands and knees with a ruler. She fined me for Emma's car being parked improperly in my own driveway, apparently because it was 6 inches over some invisible line only she could see. Then she reported me to the county for possible, unpermitted driveway modifications, even though I hadn't touched my driveway in 5 years. But I'm not one to take harassment lying down. I installed security cameras and started documenting everything. That's when I discovered something beautiful: selective enforcement. Patty's wealthy friends had identical violations she completely ignored. Wrong paint colors, oversized mailboxes, cars parked the exact same way Emma's was. I created a spreadsheet. Engineers love spreadsheets, showing the clear pattern of bias. That's when Mrs. Chen knocked on my door one evening, bringing homemade cookies that smelled like vanilla and courage. She'd been watching the whole situation unfold, and she had something to tell me. "Patty tried to make me remove my rose garden," she said quietly, "the one my husband planted 30 years ago, before he passed. She said it was non-native species and created an excessive maintenance burden." Mrs. Chen's hands shook slightly as she spoke. "But I still have all the original HOA documents from when we moved in. Would you like to see them?" Here's the mini twist that changed everything. Mrs. Chen's late husband had been one of the original HOA founding members. She had copies of every covenant, every amendment, every board meeting minute going back to 1983, and when I spread those documents across my kitchen table, I realized most of Patty's current rules had never been properly voted on. The original HOA was actually pretty reasonable. Basic stuff about not letting your yard turn into a junkyard, keeping noise down after 10 p.m., all these nitpicky regulations about grass height and paint colors, added piecemeal by different boards over the years, many without proper community approval. But I needed to dig deeper. I spent the next weekend at the county recorder's office, tracing property records and utility easements. You know that musty smell of old books and bureaucracy? That became my perfume for about 10 hours straight. That's where I found something interesting about our subdivision's development history. The original developer had retained ownership of several key parcels when the neighborhood was built. Most got sold off over the years, but the road, Maple Grove Lane, had a more complicated history. When the original developers company went bankrupt in 1995, their assets got sold at auction to pay creditors. The road ownership transferred to some holding company I'd never heard of. That holding company dissolved in 2001, and their assets transferred to, well, this is where it gets good. Morrison Development, LLC. Same last name as mine. Same last name as my Uncle Bob, who'd been a small-time property investor before he died in 2018. I rushed home and started digging through the boxes of paperwork Uncle Bob had left me, stuff I'd been meaning to organize but never got around to. Somewhere in that pile of yellow documents and musty folders was a deed that would change everything. Meanwhile, Patty escalated her campaign. My fines hit $8,500, 0 cents, and were climbing daily. She threatened to place a lien on my house and scheduled a neighborhood standards hearing with county officials. Her plan was clear: bankrupt me into submission or have my property condemned. But while she was plotting my destruction, I was having the biggest holy crap moment of my adult life. Buried in Uncle Bob's estate paperwork was a deed to Maple Grove Lane private roadway easement. Every single car that entered our neighborhood, including Patty's precious BMW, was driving across property that I had inherited. Here's a knowledge nugget that might blow your mind. Private road easements are completely different from public rights-of-ways. When you own a private road, you can actually control who uses it, set maintenance requirements, even charge fees. Always research actual property boundaries and easements before assuming roads are public. Many subdivisions have surprising private ownership structures that can completely change your legal standing. I sat in my kitchen that night, holding the deed in hands that were shaking with a mixture of disbelief and righteous fury. Patty had been fining me for maintaining my own damn road. First thing the next morning, I called a real estate attorney. I needed someone to confirm what I was seeing because this seemed too good to be true. 2 days later, sitting in her office that smelled like leather-bound law books and expensive coffee, I got the confirmation that made my heart race. But Morrison, you definitely own that road. The title chain is clear, and you've been legally responsible for its maintenance all along. The HOA never had any authority to regulate it. But here's what I didn't do. Immediately march over to Patty's house and wave the deed in her face. Because Patty was about to give me something much better than a quick victory. She was about to hang herself with her own rope. She raised my total fines to $25,000 and scheduled an emergency community meeting to discuss the problem resident. She even invited the local TV news crew to cover what she called a neighborhood dispute. This woman actually thought having cameras present would help her case. The meeting was packed. Over 40 neighbors showed up, plus the Channel 7 news team with their bright lights that made everything feel like a small-town congressional hearing. Patty had prepared a 20-minute PowerPoint about maintaining community standards, complete with enlarged photos of my road work labeled as unauthorized modification. This resident's defiance threatens everyone's property values, she declared to the cameras, gesturing at me like I was some kind of common criminal. We need community support for necessary enforcement action. I sat quietly in the back row, taking notes and letting her dig her hole deeper. The room was getting uncomfortable. You could feel the tension in the way people shifted in their plastic chairs and avoided eye contact. Here's the mini twist. Instead of defending myself, I requested permission to respond to her accusations. Patty, probably expecting some kind of broken apology, smugly agreed. I walked to the front of the room carrying a folder of documents and unfolded a surveyor's map on the table. The room went dead silent except for the hum of the news camera. Before we discuss road violations, I said calmly, let's clarify who actually owns the road. The expression on Patty's face when I showed the deed was priceless. Pure shock, like someone had just told her Santa Claus was real, and he was suing her for trespassing. I explained everything clearly. I had inherited the road from Uncle Bob, every resident had been using my private property for access, and I'd been maintaining their route at my own expense for years. The county official who'd attended asked to examine the documents and confirmed they looked authentic. The HOA never had authority to regulate my private road, I continued. I've been subsidizing this neighborhood's infrastructure while being fined for improving my own property. Patty's desperate response was to claim the documents were fake or irrelevant. She insisted the HOA had established authority and threatened to have the county investigate my fraud. But you could see in her eyes that she knew the game had just changed completely. The reasonable neighbors immediately understood what this meant. Several approached me afterward, thanking me for maintaining the road and apologizing for not speaking up during the harassment campaign. About 15 residents left with Patty, but the majority stayed to hear my proposal. I'm offering a Maple Grove Road cooperative agreement, I said. Residents pay a modest monthly fee for professional maintenance. I retain ownership but commit to community input. We end the current fines and legal threats and everyone gets a properly maintained road. Patty refused to consider any compromise. She stormed out screaming that this wasn't over and threatening to sue me for blackmail. Her core supporters followed her, but Mrs. Chen immediately stepped up to organize an information meeting for interested residents. The local news ran the story that night. HOA road ownership dispute reveals private property rights. The video went viral on social media, with comments overwhelmingly supporting me. Patty's threats and behavior made her look completely unreasonable next to my calm, factual presentation. Here's another knowledge nugget that saved me thousands in legal fees. HOAs cannot self-enforce liens without actual court judgments. Many HOA threats are legally toothless bluffs designed to intimidate homeowners who don't know their rights. If your HOA threatens liens, demand to see actual court orders. Many associations rely on fear tactics rather than legitimate legal authority. I gave the community 1 week to respond to my proposal. Within 3 days, I'd received calls from over 20 interested neighbors. Mrs. Chen organized a road cooperative information meeting while Patty held a competing defense strategy meeting with her remaining supporters. The battle lines were drawn, but for the first time since this whole mess started, I held all the cards. But owning the road was just the tip of the iceberg. When I really dug into Uncle Bob's paperwork, and I mean spread everything across my dining room table like some kind of property detective, I discovered something that made the road ownership look like small potatoes. Uncle Bob hadn't just owned the road, His company, Morrison Development LLC, had originally developed the entire Willowbrook Estates subdivision back in the 1980s. Every lot, every utility easement, every carefully planned curve in our little suburban paradise, Uncle Bob had designed it all. The road wasn't just private property. It had been specifically designed as a private access point to maximize the value of every lot in the neighborhood. It was never intended to be public or HOA controlled. Uncle Bob had kept ownership intentionally, both for liability protection and to maintain quality standards. My real estate attorney explained the full scope of what I'd inherited. As the road owner, I could legally control access, set usage rules, and even charge maintenance fees. The only restriction was that I couldn't suddenly strand existing residents without reasonable notice. But I had essentially unlimited authority over my own property. Here's the financial reality that blew my mind. Over 30 years, road maintenance had cost approximately $180,000 0 cents. My recent $3,200 0 cents repair job had increased property values by an estimated $15,000 0 cents per home. Simple math, the neighborhood's 47 homes had collectively benefited by over $700,000 0 cents from my work alone. Mrs. Chen filled in the historical context that made everything make sense. The original HOA had been genuinely cooperative, focused on basic community maintenance and neighbor relations. Uncle Bob used to coordinate road work through HOA communications, and everyone chipped in fairly. Your uncle was a good man, Mrs. Chen told me over tea that tasted like jasmine and justice. He never made anyone feel like they owed him, even though legally they did. Patty's regime represents a hostile takeover of what used to be a real community. The power shift in my brain was like switching on floodlights. I'd been approaching this completely backwards. I wasn't a resident subject to HOA rules about the road. I was a property owner whose asset was being regulated by his customers. Those 47 homes depended entirely on my private road for access, and I'd been too polite to acknowledge my leverage. But here's what really got to me. I'd been subsidizing these people's infrastructure while they fined me for the privilege. The HOA budget showed zero allocation for road maintenance because they'd been freeloading on my inheritance for years. I made a strategic decision that night. I could have gone nuclear immediately, posted private road no trespassing signs and locked down access until people paid up, but that's not who I am. I wanted to solve this problem fairly, not destroy the neighborhood out of spite. My plan was simple: educate the community about the true ownership structure, offer a reasonable compromise, and escalate to access restrictions only if the harassment continued. This was about respect and fairness, not revenge. I scheduled a professional surveyor to mark the exact road boundaries and ordered proper signage indicating private road status. I researched insurance implications and consulted with a traffic lawyer about proper procedures. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. The emotional turning point for me was realizing I could actually protect other neighbors from Patty's tyranny. Mrs. Chen's rose garden, the veterans' flag, all the petty harassment. I had the power to end it by ending Patty's authority over the road that made her little kingdom possible. I shifted from defensive victim to empowered property owner. But with great power comes great responsibility, and I was determined to use this leverage wisely. The next week felt like preparing for the most important presentation of my life. My attorney walked me through every detail of private road owner rights and responsibilities. I could legally post signage, control hours, restrict certain vehicles, and charge maintenance fees. The catch? I had to provide reasonable access to existing residents and couldn't suddenly strand people without proper legal notice. I hired a professional surveyor to confirm the exact boundaries. Every inch mattered if this was going to court. Watching him work with that precise electronic equipment, beeping and measuring while neighbors pretended not to stare from their windows, felt like drawing battle lines with scientific precision. The traffic engineer I consulted calculated fair usage fees based on actual vehicle counts. He sat at the road entrance for 3 days, clicking one of those handheld counters every time a car passed. The metallic click, click, click became the soundtrack of data gathering. His conclusion? $50 0 cents per month per household would more than cover professional maintenance, snow removal, and emergency repairs. Emma turned into my secret weapon for community outreach. She created a neighborhood Facebook group called Fair HOA Governance and started documenting the harassment timeline with photos and screenshots. My daughter has this gift for making complex legal stuff sound reasonable, and her posts began attracting supporters I didn't even know I had. "Dad, look at this," she said, showing me her laptop screen filled with comments. "Mrs. Peterson says Patty fined her for having the wrong mailbox numbers. Mr. Garcia got cited for his kid's chalk drawings on his own driveway. This woman is insane." I designed an educational presentation explaining the road ownership history, complete with maps, photos, and a simple FAQ. My engineering background came in handy. I knew how to make technical information digestible. The key was showing people this wasn't about money or revenge. It was about ending the harassment and creating a sustainable solution. The financial analysis was eye-opening. I calculated that over the years, I'd essentially been subsidizing the neighborhood's infrastructure to the tune of about $150. 0 cents per household per month. My proposed $50 0 cents fee was actually a bargain compared to typical HOA road assessments. Mrs. Chen introduced me to other longtime residents who'd been quietly suffering under Patty's regime. Tom the contractor offered to donate materials and labor if needed. The attorney provided continued guidance on legal procedures. Even the traffic engineer offered to testify about professional road standards if it came to that. My contingency planning covered every scenario I could imagine. If education failed, I'd escalate to formal usage agreements. If harassment continued, I'd restrict access during specific hours. If legal threats persisted, I'd countersue for harassment and defamation. The nuclear option, complete access restriction, was legally possible but would take careful coordination with emergency services. Here's a knowledge nugget that could save you money if you're ever dealing with shared infrastructure. Private road maintenance cooperatives can actually provide tax advantages through proper structuring. Shared infrastructure costs may qualify for certain business deductions if organized correctly. When dealing with private road disputes, research cooperative ownership structures and tax implications. Sometimes financial benefits can motivate better solutions than legal threats. The timing strategy was crucial. I decided to wait for Patty's next escalation before revealing my full hand. This would maximize the impact and give the community a clear choice between her authoritarian approach and my cooperative solution. I practiced staying calm under pressure, knowing Patty would likely have an explosive reaction. My goal was to focus on solutions, not blame, and give the community a real chance to choose cooperation over conflict. The psychological preparation was just as important as the legal prep. I had to accept that some level of conflict was unavoidable. Patty had built her entire neighborhood identity around controlling others, and she wouldn't give that up easily. But I also prepared for the possibility that this could heal the community. If we could establish a fair, transparent system for road maintenance, it might become a model for handling other shared expenses. Maybe we could even restore some of the neighborly cooperation that Mrs. Chin remembered from the early days. The surveyor finished his work on a Thursday, planting small flags every 50 feet along the road boundaries. The sharp smell of spray paint marking property lines mixed with the scent of honeysuckle from Mrs. Chen's garden. A strange combination of legal precision and natural beauty. Friday morning, I had professional signs ready to install. Private road, Morrison Development LLC owner, and authorized access only, usage agreements required. But I held off on putting them up. I wanted to give diplomacy one more chance. Because sometimes, when you hold all the cards, the most powerful move is letting your opponent make the next mistake. Patty made that mistake faster than I expected. Monday morning, I found a sheriff's sale notice posted on my front door, the thick, legal-sized paper that crinkled ominously in the morning breeze. She was actually trying to force the sale of my house to collect her imaginary fines. But here's where her arrogance really showed. She called the local news station claiming victory over the problem resident and scheduled a press conference to announce her successful enforcement action. This woman was so drunk on her perceived power that she was advertising her overreach to the entire county. I said nothing publicly, just went about my business, letting Patty dig her hole deeper while I quietly prepared the nuclear option. My attorney filed a motion to dismiss the lien. Turns out you can't just declare debts and force property sales without actual court judgments. But I didn't announce that victory yet. The professional survey stakes were still planted along the road boundaries like little flags of impending doom. I had the private road signs ready in my garage, but I wanted Patty to commit fully to her course of destruction before I revealed my trump card. Meanwhile, the community was fracturing. Several neighbors approached me privately with apologies and their own horror stories. Mr. Garcia told me Patty had threatened to fine him for his kids drawing with chalk on their own driveway. Mrs. Peterson got cited for having the wrong style mailbox numbers, even though they'd been there for 15 years. "She's lost her mind," Mrs. Peterson whispered to me at the grocery store, glancing around like Patty might be hiding behind the cereal boxes. "But we're all scared to speak up because she retaliates against anyone who crosses her." Here's the mini twist that showed just how desperate Patty was getting. I discovered through Emma's social media detective work that Patty's husband Richard was facing an ethics investigation. His law practice was being accused of overcharging HOA clients and potentially kickback schemes with preferred contractors. Patty was using her HOA presidency to generate business for Richard's firm, creating a massive conflict of interest. The same emergency protocols that required expensive approved contractors, Richard was getting legal fees from those companies. The inflated fines and legal threats, more billable hours for his practice. But I held on to this information. Sometimes the best weapon is the one you don't use yet. Patty's media blitz backfired spectacularly. Her interview about maintaining community standards made her look petty and vindictive, especially when she claimed I represented a property value threat while standing next to the beautifully maintained road I'd fixed with my own money. Local small business owners started reaching out to support me. They dealt with similar petty authority abuse from city councils and permit offices. Tom the contractor offered to organize other tradespeople to help with road maintenance. A local restaurant owner offered to cater the next community meeting for free. The social media war was heating up too. Emma's Fair HOA governance group had gained over 200 members, including people from other neighborhoods sharing their own HOA horror stories. Patty's supporters created a competing property standards protection group, but their posts just made them look more unreasonable. That's when Patty made her biggest mistake yet. She organized a petition to remove the problem resident and started spreading rumors about my personal life and finances. She told people I was probably laundering money through fake road repairs and suggested I was behind on my mortgage payments. The whisper campaign was the final straw. When you attack someone's character based on lies, you've crossed from petty harassment into something much more serious. I made my decision. Friday evening, I sent a simple email to every household in the neighborhood. Community meeting, Sunday, 2 p.m., important information about road ownership. No details, no threats, just a calm invitation to learn the truth. Patty responded by scheduling her own competing meeting for the same time, calling it emergency action against problem resident. She even invited county officials and local media, planning to have me publicly humiliated and possibly arrested for whatever charges she could dream up. The stage was set for the final confrontation. I had my attorney on standby, the surveyor ready with boundary documentation, and a folder full of evidence about Patty's harassment campaign and her husband's ethics issues. But most importantly, I had the road ownership deed in my briefcase, along with professional signs ready to install the moment I chose to end this charade. Sunday was going to be very interesting, and this time I wasn't going to let Patty control the narrative. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel like destiny. Both meetings were scheduled for 2 p.m. at the community center. Patty's emergency action against problem resident versus my simple, important information about road ownership. I arrived 30 minutes early with my attorney, the surveyor, and a briefcase full of documentation. The parking lot was already filling up with cars, and I could see neighbors choosing sides by which entrance they used. The tension was thick enough to cut with a surveyor's stake. Patty had gone full drama queen. She'd set up a projector, invited the Channel 7 news crew again, and somehow convinced a county code enforcement officer and a sheriff's deputy to attend. Her plan was obviously to have me arrested or at least publicly humiliated on live television. The room was packed, over 60 people, the largest gathering in neighborhood history. Patty had claimed the podium and was already in full performance mode when I walked in. She'd prepared another PowerPoint, this one titled, "Protecting Our Community from Fraudulent Residents." For 20 minutes, she ranted about my unauthorized road modifications, showed enlarged photos of my work, and claimed my defiance was threatening everyone's property values. She even brought props, a ruler for measuring grass height, and printed copies of fake violations she'd invented. "This resident," she declared, pointing directly at me like I was a war criminal, "has shown complete disregard for our community's standards. Today we vote to ban him from all common areas and pursue criminal charges for fraud and property destruction." The applause was scattered and uncomfortable. You could feel the room's mood shifting as people realized how unhinged this had become. When Patty finally finished her theatrical performance, she smugly offered me a chance to respond, probably expecting some kind of desperate plea for mercy. Instead, I stood up calmly, walked to the front of the room, and placed my surveyor's boundary map on the table, where everyone could see it. "Before we discuss road violations," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, "let's clarify who actually owns the road we're talking about." The mini twist that ended everything. I unfolded the original development deed and inheritance documentation showing how Maple Grove Lane had never been public property. Every single resident, including Patty, had been using my private road for access without permission or payment. I inherited this road from my uncle, who developed this entire subdivision in the 1980s. For the past 5 years, I've been maintaining your access route at my own expense while being fined for improving my own property. The county official asked to examine the documents, the surveyor confirmed the boundaries, the sheriff's deputy looked increasingly uncomfortable as he realized Patty had called him to a civil property dispute that was completely outside his jurisdiction. Patty's response was pure desperation. She claimed my documents were fabricated, that I was running some kind of elaborate scam, and that the county needed to investigate me for fraud. But you could see in her eyes that she knew the game was over. I offered my reasonable solution one final time: a road cooperative where residents paid modest monthly fees for professional maintenance. I'd retain ownership but commit to community input. Fair, transparent, and beneficial to everyone. Patty's meltdown was spectacular. She refused any compromise, screaming that I was blackmailing the community and threatening to sue everyone who cooperated with my extortion scheme. She actually used the word extortion to describe asking people to help pay for maintaining the road they used every day. When she realized the room wasn't buying her hysteria, she stormed out with her core supporters, yelling that this isn't over and threatening to expose this fraud to the state attorney general. The door slamming behind her echoed through the suddenly quiet room like the end of a very long, very stupid war. Mrs. Chen immediately stood up and started organizing the reasonable neighbors who wanted to discuss the cooperative proposal. About 35 households expressed serious interest. The county official confirmed that everything appeared legally proper and suggested we work out the details privately. The news crew interviewed both sides afterward. Patty's on-camera rant about fraudulent residents and property theft made her look completely unhinged, while my calm explanation of inheritance and reasonable cost-sharing came across as totally sensible. That night, the story went viral on local social media. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive of my position, with dozens of people sharing their own HOA horror stories and praising me for finding a fair solution. But the real victory was walking outside after the meeting and seeing neighbors actually talking to each other again, instead of hiding behind curtains and avoiding eye contact. For the first time in months, Willowbrook Estates felt like a community instead of a war zone. I thought the Sunday meeting had ended things, but Patty had one more card to play. She set a deadline for Friday at 5 p.m., demanding I cease all fraudulent claims or face full legal consequences. Her plan was to rally her remaining supporters for one final confrontation. Friday evening, I arrived at the community center parking lot with my attorney, surveyor, and a stack of professional private road Morrison Development LLC signs ready to install. The setting sun cast long shadows across the asphalt as both factions gathered for what everyone knew would be the final showdown. Patty had organized what she called a Save Our Neighborhood rally. Her supporters held handmade signs reading "Stop the Road Bully" and "Protect Our Rights." She'd brought her husband, Richard, and 3 of his lawyer friends, clearly planning to intimidate me into backing down through sheer legal firepower. The Channel 7 news crew was there again, along with a reporter from the county newspaper who'd heard about the viral HOA dispute. A sheriff's deputy stood by to maintain order, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else dealing with actual crimes. Mrs. Chin, bless her heart, stepped forward to facilitate the discussion as our neighborhood's unofficial elder stateswoman. The smell of her jasmine perfume mixed with the autumn air and tension, sweat from about 50 nervous neighbors. I presented my road cooperative proposal one final time. $50, 0 cents per month per household for professional maintenance, transparent accounting, community input on major decisions, and a 5-year rate lock. Compared to typical HOA road assessments, it was actually a bargain. Patty's counterattack was pure theater. She claimed my ownership was just a legal technicality and that the community had established rights through decades of use. Her voice got higher and more shrill as she insisted I was trying to steal their road and extort honest families. "This man," she shrieked, pointing at me like I was some kind of monster, "is holding our entire neighborhood hostage. He's demanding we pay him for the privilege of driving to our own homes." Here's where Tom the contractor stepped up and delivered the perfect reality check. He explained the actual costs of road maintenance, showed photos of the deterioration before my repairs, and calculated how much money I'd personally saved everyone over the years. "Jake's been subsidizing this whole neighborhood," Tom said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who actually knows construction. "That road would have cost us $50,000 to fix properly. He did it for $3,000 and asked for nothing." I made my final offer, reducing the fee to $40, 0 cents per month, and including winter snow removal. "I'm giving everyone until Sunday to decide. After that, I'll be installing private road signage and requiring usage agreements for all vehicles." That's when Patty played her nuclear card. She announced that if anyone signed my extortion contract, she would personally sue them for conspiracy to commit fraud. She claimed she'd found a way to build an alternate access road and that residents didn't need my criminal highway. The county official who'd been quietly observing finally spoke up. "Ma'am, there are no available easements for alternate access. The surrounding properties are privately owned with no right-of-ways provisions. The cost would exceed $2 million, plus environmental permits, and it would take 3 to 5 years minimum." Patty's face went through about 6 different shades of red as she realized her bluff had been called publicly and on camera. "I don't care what it costs," she screamed. "We will not be held hostage by this fraud." That's when I delivered my mic drop moment. "Mrs. Hendricks," I said calmly, "you've spent 6 months fining me for maintaining my own property while your husband's law firm collected fees from every HOA enforcement action. You've harassed elderly residents, targeted families with children, and turned this neighborhood into a war zone. The only fraud here is your abuse of power." The crowd went dead silent. Even the news cameras seemed to focus more intently. "I'm offering a fair solution that benefits everyone. But if you prefer to build a $2 million road to avoid paying $40 a month, that's your choice. Just remember, you'll still need to cross my property to get to your construction site." The informal vote was swift and decisive. 35 households supported the cooperative agreement, 8 were undecided, and only Patty's core group of 6 households rejected it outright. Saturday morning, I installed the professional signage. "Private road, authorized access only" signs went up at both ends of Maple Grove Lane, with a 30-day grace period notice for current residents to finalize usage agreements. Patty tried one last desperate gambit, organizing neighbors to remove the signs and calling police to report vandalism of public property. The sheriff's deputy who responded took one look at my ownership documentation and politely explained to Patty that I had every legal right to mark my own property. The media coverage that weekend showed a calm, reasonable property owner offering fair solutions versus a hysterical woman demanding impossible outcomes. Public opinion wasn't even close. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates is a completely different place. The Maple Grove Road Cooperative is officially incorporated, with 37 participating households paying their monthly fees through a simple online system. The road has never looked better. Professional maintenance, proper drainage, and even decorative plantings along the edges that Mrs. Patty's reign of terror ended exactly the way you'd expect. She lost the HOA presidency in an emergency election 3 weeks after our showdown. Turns out when people aren't afraid of retaliation, they vote for sanity. Her husband Richard's law practice collapsed after the county ethics investigation found systematic overcharging and kickback schemes. The family quietly listed their house for sale within 6 months and moved to a different state. The ripple effects have been incredible. I receive emails from homeowners across the country facing similar HOA abuse, all looking for advice on fighting back. The local news did a follow-up story on HOA reform, and the county is actually considering new oversight requirements for community associations. Our case has been referenced in 3 different property rights lawsuits as an example of how private road cooperatives can work. But the real victory is seeing Mrs. Chen's rose garden in full bloom again, with no fear of citation letters. She organized a neighborhood welcome committee that actually welcomes new residents instead of terrorizing them. Our annual road maintenance meeting has become a community social event where people plan block parties and coordinate babysitting swaps. Property values have increased an average of $12,000 per home since we established professional road maintenance. The road cooperative has built up a healthy reserve fund for future repairs. Everyone saves money compared to typical HOA assessments, and we get transparent accounting instead of mysterious administrative fees. The psychological transformation in the neighborhood is even more impressive than the financial benefits. People wave to each other again. Kids play in the street without parents worrying about violation notices. The Facebook group Emma created has evolved into genuine community organizing for positive projects. I never intended to become a community activist. This whole experience taught me that sometimes ordinary people have to stand up to bullies even when it's uncomfortable. I learned the power of documentation, patience, and building coalitions. Most importantly, I discovered that principled resistance can create positive change when you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. We've established the Fair HOA Advocacy Fund using some of the cooperative surplus funds. It provides legal resources for homeowners facing abuse and partners with a local legal aid society to offer educational workshops on property rights. 3 neighboring communities have adopted similar cooperative models after seeing our success. The legal precedent we set has helped other private road disputes get resolved through mediation instead of expensive litigation. Local government updated subdivision regulations to require clearer disclosure of private road ownership. Even HOA management companies have started emphasizing transparency and resident rights in their training programs. But my favorite outcome is watching Emma, now a college freshman studying public policy, use this experience in her coursework about grassroots organizing and community development. She's written papers on how ordinary citizens can effectively challenge institutional abuse, and she credits our road war with inspiring her career path. Last week, I got a call from a homeowner in the next county dealing with a similar situation. Pool maintenance company Monopoly, with HOA board members getting kickbacks from overpriced contracts. Residents are facing huge special assessments while board members profit. I'm meeting with them next weekend to share our documentation strategies and cooperative model. The annual road maintenance meeting is next month, and Mrs. Chen is organizing a neighborhood potluck to go with it. Tom, the contractor, is donating materials for some decorative stonework at the entrance. The cooperative voted to add bicycle lanes and improved lighting. We're planning a small festival in the fall to celebrate our 2nd anniversary. This is what community actually looks like when people choose cooperation over control, transparency over corruption, and fairness over fear. So here's my challenge to you. If you're dealing with HOA abuse, petty authoritarians, or any situation where someone's using a little bit of power to make your life miserable, fight back. Document everything. Research your rights, build alliances, and don't let bullies win through intimidation. Drop a comment and share your own HOA nightmare story. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be pushed around by power-hungry neighbors. And if you want to see more stories about ordinary people standing up to institutional bullies, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the best revenge is just refusing to be a victim.